Does everything really happen for a reason? On this video, I'm going to share with you a philosophy that has been taught by some of the greatest thinkers in history and that will allow you to live a life of empowerment and enjoyment, not stress. Let's start with one of my favorite quotes from one of the smartest men in modern history, Albert Einstein. He turned around and said, one of the most important questions a person can answer in their lifetime is whether they live in a friendly or hostile universe. What was he getting at? What he actually meant was that if you see life as hostile in terms of out there, separate from you, you are this small little independent microcosm in a unfriendly, unloving world, then you are inherently looking at life through a fear-based lens. Why? Because everything out there just happens. It is the world of materialism and cause and effect. Whereas if you believe you live in a friendly universe, then you're buying into a philosophy that says there is a higher and greater level of intelligence. The same level of intelligence that means you don't have to set an alarm at 3 o'clock in the morning to remind yourself to beat your own heart because something smarter than you is doing that already. Now, I'm not going to get drawn into a philosophical argument over whose label for that intelligence is right. Yeah, if you want to call it God, the universe, being, evolution, I don't care. After all, one of the biggest travesties of humanity is that we go to war and kill each other over whose version of that label is actually correct. Give it up. But what I am saying is if you don't believe that you live in a friendly universe, by default, stuff will happen to you. And that is not a great place to live because most people then become a victim of circumstance. Whereas if you believe that life happens for you, if you believe you live in a friendly universe, that everything unfolds for a reason, then you are going to live a very different life. The point being, my friends, is if you think you live in a hostile universe, then you live in a Darwinian mentality of survival of the fittest. And therefore, if something happens, you're living through the law of cause and effect. People that tend to get on and have a more empowering relationship to life are living through the lens of causing an effect, as the great Dr. Joe Dispenza would say. The interesting point to note here, guys, is it doesn't actually matter which is objectively true. The only thing that matters to you as the star of your movie is which model do you choose and does it empower you or disempower you. You can choose to believe in the materialistic world, which, by the way, if you go look at one of my videos on Are We Living in a Virtual Reality, you'll see that that is an old paradigm that no longer stacks up in the latest levels of science. And when you start to understand that in quantum physics right now, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that intention affects what shows up. Your inner world affects your outer world. How do we know that? Well, it's actually in law. We call it the placebo effect. In other words, yes, your beliefs about something can change physical matter reality. But what about circumstantial reality? 1000% yes. Intention affects the probability distribution of what is brought in or out of your experience. This is what the New Age movement tend to term as the law of attraction. But often that isn't backed up with science. But if you take the time and study the latest information in digital physics, in quantum physics, you will know that particles aren't particles. It is not a material world. It is actually based upon probability distribution. And if your intention, your consciousness has an impact on that, wow, that could be the greatest secret you have ever discovered in life. So how does it play out? Well, let's look at what some of the other great teachers of successful lives have shared with us. Let's take Napoleon Hill, the author of Think and Grow Rich, quite arguably the father of modern personal growth. He states unequivocally, every adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. The challenge with most people who live in a fear-based reality, a hostile universe, is that they're too busy focused on the adversity to actually water the seed. But let me ask you a question. Have you ever had a time where you've encountered what you felt to be something traumatic, something that was a huge adversity, only to look back 6 months later and say, wow, thank God that happened, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this now? My question is, if you know that in advance, why wait 6 months to celebrate? You see, I want you to imagine it like this. Every decision that you make is like a door to another corridor. As agents of free will, as human beings that are sentient, we have the ability to make choices based upon our free will. So let's just say we call that our decision space. And in any moment in time, we could have, let's say, for example, 100 decisions that we could make. That's like having a corridor of 100 doors. Now, when you open the door, that could lead into, let's say, a positive experience or a negative experience from the mindset of how we think life should play out. But here's what's fascinating and what we now know in quantum science. Your attitude to what's behind that door statistically affects what shows up behind that door. And let's just say you have 100 choices or decisions that you could make within your current area of free will. Now that doesn't include, for example, if you live in London, that doesn't include having breakfast in Tokyo in 30 minutes, at least not yet, because that's outside of your ability to make that decision because it's bound by the rules of the material world. But if you were to make the decisions that you can make, for example, I can choose to order this off the menu or that off the menu at my local breakfast cafe. Every decision you make opens another corridor to another set of decisions. And I want you to imagine that each corridor has 50 doors that are, let's say, green, that lead to a positive decision or a positive outcome, and 50 doors are red that could lead to a slightly more negative or less beneficial outcome. Here's what we now know in quantum mechanics, that the intention or the energy or the attitude of you approaching that door determines the probability of what doors are behind it. In other words, if you approach a door and you open it and there is, it could have been a 50-50 as to whether that decision turns out good or not, your attitude towards opening that door will affect the balance of probability as to what shows up behind the door. In other words, let's just say instead of 50-50, you approach it and it's a hugely positive anticipation that you have, you're automatically shifting the balance of probabilities from 50-50 to say 60-40. Now that doesn't mean to say that it's going to turn out perfectly. No. You can still open a red door. But if you celebrate, oh my God, that didn't go the way I wanted to, clearly there's a reason for it, and it's gonna serve me because I live in a friendly universe, then you're automatically then adjusting the balance of probabilities to the next door, maybe 70-30. My point here, guys, is this. Have you ever wondered why a casino is the only business model that guarantees profitability mathematically, which is why they're such a tightly guarded or revered industry? Imagine you're the casino owner and somebody walks in as a gambler and they're playing roulette and they're betting on black or red. What do you think the odds are of black or red? Well, if you said 50-50, you'd be wrong. Why? Because of that little green square at the top called 0, which shifts the balance from, let's say, 49 to 51. Or in America, unfortunately, they try to screw you over by putting 2 zeros. There's a 0 and a double 0. So the probability is even less, 50-50. So if you were to be a casino owner, you know that you have to lose 49% of the time to win 51% of the time. So if somebody walks out of your casino betting black and red with $100,000 up, you don't care. You know over time you are guaranteed mathematically to win. Now, what relevance does that have to this conversation? Everything. If you open the door of the next decision you make and you find a situation you don't like, if you react to that in a negative way, you stack the deck behind those doors that are following to be more negative than positive. Again, gamblers know this. You ever heard of, oh, I'm on a winning streak. Oh, I'm on a losing streak. It's where it comes from. You're adjusting the balance of probabilities in real time. So if you celebrate every single outcome, especially the negative, as hard as that may be, as much emotional maturity as that takes, because like the casino owner, you don't get upset if somebody's walking out because you're playing a bigger game. You become the house, not the gambler. And as we all know, over time, the house always wins. If you believe that everything happens for a reason, over time, you will have a better life than a worse life. If you believe that everything happens haphazardly and you're reacting to negativity, then you're going to have more negativity. Occasionally you'll have some great stuff, like occasionally a gambler will win. But over time, the house always wins. And knowing that everything happens for a reason makes you the house, not the gambler. And that, my friends, is the key to playing life on your terms, using the laws of quantum mechanics and every aspect of what all of the spiritual masters and the wisest men in history have been telling us emphatically throughout the last several centuries. Of course, the choice is yours. Now trust me, life doesn't really care whether you believe this or not. It'll only react to what it is that you choose. So choose wisely, my friends. You start to believe that everything happens for a reason, and then the next time somebody leaves you, you won't go into depression. You'll say, wow, thank God they moved, so they made room for somebody who's right. And guess what? You've got a higher probability of the next person showing up to be even more perfect. I hope you enjoyed this video, and for some of you, you're starting to believe that there's a reason that you watched it in the first place. Please leave a comment below, please subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and there's a high probability that we'll be delivering some more wisdom to you through this channel very soon.